Hello, this is James Rees for another Razorwire, and today we're going to be talking about third parties and security. Okay? My feed recently, at the end of 2020, I don't know when you're going to be seeing this video, is ablaze with the discussion of third party security, third party attacks, management of third parties, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, what's my opinion on this? You're only as secure as your weakest link. Okay, remember that. When you're in InfoSec, when you're doing InfoSec as a role, one of the things that you're going to be looking at is where are your weakest areas. Your weakest areas might be within your own network. They might be within your own business from a physical standpoint. They could be anywhere. You need to look at them. But one of the key areas that I think you're going to find is third parties. Okay. What do I mean by that? Well, a third party is obviously anybody who provides services to you or your organization to make it run. Okay, provide a service of some description. So, good example. Let's say your organization has outsourced the management of their network, and you use an organization who they maintain the firewalls, they maintain the VLANs, they maintain the cloud environments. They do it for you normally because it's cheaper than having your own people to do it. Okay. They need to make sure that the security of that environment is in line with your expectations. Okay, but then also you have to remember that they have to secure their environment to the same kind of level as what your expectations potentially are. If they have a weak link, then and they're compromised, then it could, by proxy, compromise your particular solution or the solution that they're providing you. Okay, so it's highly important to make sure that you communicate with your third parties, learn who they are, learn what they do, learn the services that they're providing your organization, and start talking with their internal staff. Hopefully they have an InfoSec guy or person. Hopefully they are on board with that. But that's no guarantee that there is a situation where they are actually managing security in the same way that you are. And even if they do have an information security person, it doesn't mean that they have the same level of knowledge that you do. Maybe they've got different things that they're concentrating on. You've got to remember their organisation is their organisation, and they will have a very different view on security than you and your organisation. There might be some very close alignments, but that's what you've got to remember. Okay, so it's quite important that if you are part of the kind of selection process for third-party providers, that you spend a bit of time with the account managers, their internal staff, their InfoSec people, to find out a little bit about how they handle their InfoSec. You can do this via kind of like some form of sheet that they fill out. You can do it through standard communication, video links, that kind of thing, face to face. But it's usually a good idea to kind of find out really where they stand with it. Now, sometimes it's easy if they've got certifications like ISO 27001. Asked to see their ISMS, asked to have a discussion with the InfoSec people or whoever manages it to find out kind of what they've done. Always check the scope of their compliance, but it's a good indicator of where they stand from a security standpoint. If you're an institution that has PCI requirements, then don't forget your service provider, if they're doing anything at all that can affect the security of the cardholder data, be it in transit, processing, or storage, will have a PCI DSS element that they need to facilitate. And they will be required to comply in accordance with that as a service provider. So check their attestations of compliance. If they're providing you with an SAQ, then I do recommend you do further investigation. You have to remember an SAQ under PCI DSS is a self-assessment. So they are marking their own homework. Now, I'm not saying this is a regular thing, but there have been quite a few instances in the past where people have completed a self-assessment and they haven't been quite so truthful about what they have in place because no one's checking it. There are situations where a QSA, you can request that a QSA of their choosing, countersigns that SAQ. That's something you can do, but all in all, it's a self-assessment. You can't guarantee the validity of it. If they've gone through a full report on compliance and attestation of compliance, and they've gone through as a tier 1 service provider, then they have been audited. But check very carefully on what they're providing to you versus what their certification licenses them to do. So if the certification is for the data centers only, and they're providing you with a lot of managed services on top of that, that are not covered by the attestation of compliance, then warning bells will signal, okay? So double check at all times. Now, when you're managing third parties, some organisations have a lot of them, some organisations have very few. But it's a good idea to basically sit down with the relevant team members, and usually IT is a good spot for this, especially if you're looking at something like PCI DSS or ISO 27001. Whilst they're not all tech-centric, there's a lot of technology involved in that. So sit down, find out who those third-party service providers are, and then assess kind of what they do for you. Do they manage your cloud environment? Do they provide the security for your buildings? Do they clean your offices after hours? Understand what your third parties are doing, who they are, and try and kind of assess really what level of security you want them to have as a baseline, and then start talking to them about it. When you're, as I said before, which I don't think I quite finished because I'm hopping around a bit here, when you're assessing a company, a new service provider that's coming on board, make sure you write into the contract the right to audit, okay? Make sure it's in that contract, so it allows you to audit their security at any time or within a reasonable time scale, to just make sure that they're maintaining their security to the level that you need it, okay? Security is an important part of business these days, but there's still a lot of organisations who don't take it as seriously, who may cut corners. They don't want to do certain things. They haven't got the money to do certain things. So make sure that you check them out thoroughly, okay? As he takes a sip of coffee from his stolen mug. Still got it. Sorry, Jamie. Okay, so once you've established who your third parties are, record them. Okay, record who they are, where they are, what they do, blah, 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 main contacts and all the rest of it. List them down. Maybe you've got a GRC tool. If you don't have a GRC tool, then you're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way through spreadsheets, that kind of thing. Check out the security, mark down the date that you've done it, and then set yourself a task at least once a year, preferably twice a year, to kind of just double check and just check in with those service providers to find out whether or not anything big has changed, whether they've gone through maybe particular compliance, maybe you want them to become ISO 27001, and as part of that kind of onboarding process they've agreed to do it. Well, check in, find out how they're doing, on a semi-regular basis. Some of them might be a bit cagey about the absolute detail of their security, and that's their prerogative. I mean, they're their own organisation. They're not going to want to outline any security issues that they have. They want to portray themselves as being secure so that you will continue to procure their services. So just be a bit careful when you're talking to them. Don't go outside of bounds. That's not fun. if they're providing a service you like, data center service, maybe they're just providing you with a data center. Ask to go and see the data center. To say we'd love to come and see the data center, see how things are going. We're doing a yearly review of the security of the data center and our racks. So go along. More often than not, they're happy to provide it. There's going to be probably IT staff or engineers, if you've got a data center, who would have spent a bit of time in there from time to time. Maybe get them on board as well. Did you go through security? Did you have to show your passport? Did you have to show some other type of identification? Did you sign off on the visitors book? Did the CCTV look like it was happening? So on and so forth. So you can kind of get other people to champion your cause, especially if it's like IT based. If you've got internal IT staff who are liaising with IT staff at the third party provider who are providing some form of service like e-commerce or web services or mobile app creation or whatever, interact with the team, see what their thoughts are. At the end of the day, security is quite an important aspect, and those guys, if you've got them on board and you've got allies there, then they will tell you if they think there's a security issue that needs to be brought in, or they may even bring you into the situation. But the management of third parties is very much an ongoing process. It never quite comes to an end, because you're always redoing it again, after a period of time. But it's important to stay on top of it, because we are in a situation where there are security events occurring on a regular basis, where people are being compromised and so on and so forth. And if you have a service provider who has been compromised, then start asking them questions. How has this affected us? What are you doing about it? Was any of our data compromised in this? Ask them for the reports. Ask them to find, to give you information on the services that they're providing, or the changes to the services they're providing, especially if they've been bought out. Mergers and acquisitions is another area. If you've got a service provider who's just been bought out by somebody larger or a competitor or whatever, then immediately you should sit down with the guys who are coming on board once that sale has been made to find out how they handle security, because it might well be very different from the company that you've been dealing with. And they will need to know what they need to do to maintain security in line with your expectations as well. It's quite an important one, because at the moment, mergers and acquisitions happening all the time. There's a lot of companies at the moment, end of 2020, who are having difficulty, and thus, investors and larger organisations are taking advantage and buying up the smaller guys in the pond. Don't assume, this is the other one, that just because an organisation is very large or very affluent, that it's anywhere as near as secure as you are or anybody else that you're dealing with. I have seen some large organisations where the security is awesomely terrible, or they're not taking it seriously. Just because an organisation is large doesn't mean they take security seriously. So, as I've said before in previous content, keep an open mind and go in as a blank slate to review these people. You may get some resistance, and that's fine. It happens. But find ways to break through it, to get the information that you want. What you don't want is to take on a third party who has absolutely no interest in security whatsoever, has a breach, you end up having a security event which looks like it's your security event, and have absolutely no support from the service provider, and you end up with the security event that you have to spend large amounts of time and money and effort engaging with the PR people to try to deal with, because it happens far more than I care to count. I get quite a unique view of this, because I do go in and review organisations who've had breaches from a PCI DSS perspective, because obviously once you have a breach under PCI DSS and it's all checked out by the forensics teams, you will need to redo your certification. And of course, if you've had a security event, going back through certification is a much, much harder process, because any QSA or auditor worth his boots is going to put you through the ringer, because they don't want to recertify your organisation if you're only going to have another breach 5 minutes later, because it makes them look bad. So third-party management, in conclusion, is extremely important. It's extremely important to track it. It's extremely important to keep on top of it. There are some organisations that have entire teams of people and tools like GRC tools and third-party checking tools, that kind of thing, to find out the level of security for their customers. And if you want to know a little bit more about those, then get in touch and we'll be more than happy to help. But get used to third-party management. It's going to be a big thing going forward. More and more services are becoming platform as a service, software as a service, SaaS, PaaS, whatever. Everything seems to be going down the service provider route. So keep on top of it, track it, make sure that you engage with organisations who take security seriously. If you do that, I'm not saying you're not going to have an event, but there's a much less likely chance that you are, and even if you do, you're going to be able to recover it from it a lot quicker, because that organisation will have plans and procedures in place to handle security incidents and events. And this is the other thing, don't just look at the technological aspect or the physical aspect of security for these organisations. Make sure they have a robust governance. Make sure they have the policies, the procedures. You might not get to see all of them because they're internal, some of them might be internal only documents, but make sure that they have a security program in place that's supported by governance people. It's, security is not just technology, it's people and process as well. So always include that. This is James Rees for RazorWire. Please feel free to subscribe below and press the little bell for notifications when we produce new content and upload it. If there's any questions that you have or anything that you want me to cover, it was very high level and there's a lot to this kind of subject matter, then let me know through the comms in the description or in the comments below, and I'll be more than happy to cover anything in a bit more specifics. So look after yourselves, speak soon, and goodbye.